Hi, and welcome to Unapologetic Women, a podcast about current affairs, culture, politics, life, and how we got here. Brought to you by Tony and Saoirse. These are unscripted conversations about things we care about, not things we are experts in. Oh, and there's probably going to be a bit of swearing too. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Plowing through. So today we're going to have a chat about what's happening in the world right now and absorbing everyone's brain capacity. The lovely land of, oh, that's a horrible way to say that, but the unknown land of COVID-19 coronavirus.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about you because you, like many others, are a social animal and a social being. And it's interesting because when I talk to people like, how are you doing? I'm just like, I don't know, I'm an introvert. I like staying at home. I work from home. So this is like business as usual with a caveat. But how are you dealing with all of this?
Yeah, it's the little bits of not being able to go and like get a cup of coffee in the morning from wherever, or like drive into town and have lunch with people, or go for a drink after work. Like those are very normal weekly tasks for me. So I think that's been a bit challenging, but I've been working from home now for 2.5 years. And so the work from home piece is something I'm very used to and very acclimated to. And that's been fascinating for me to see people really, really struggling with this component of working from home and these laundry lists of things that people are able to get done during the, like, I saw a screenshot on someone's Instagram of like 7 a.m. wake up, do gym workout, 9 a.m. cook breakfast, 10 a.m. put load of laundry on, 11 calls, 12 lunch, 2 o'clock check on laundry, like 3 o'clock sort fridge, 4 o'clock calls. And I was like, that's
Not work from home.
No, that's not work from home. That's definitely not.
I have a feeling that there's a lot of corporations. I mean, you talked to me about this, getting on the call with a well-known agency and talking about, a bunch of things. I've had this as well, of people just saying, well, why don't we meet up? Let's talk about this when things go back to normal. And you're like, actually, I think this is the new normal for the next couple of weeks, maybe months. So we can't just push things back. So it's just interesting that when it comes to the collaboration piece, people are just like, no, we have to physically be in the same room together. I don't know if you saw this, but what was it? I think it's the Wall Street Journal that published or that sent an email round to all of their employees of just like, this is what we expect from work from home. And they completely botched it, in my opinion, because it was like, you need to check in with your manager. We need to know that you're working. We need to know that you're sat behind your desk. And it was like, oh boy, this is the perfect example that if you don't trust the employees you've hired, you're in a really bad position because you shouldn't have hired them in the first place if you don't trust them. And work from home, I think for a lot of people right now just means, oh, it's kind of like a holiday. It's a whirly day. I can just, get all the stuff that I wanted to do. Whereas for you and I who are used to working from home, it's like, no, this is a normal day where I'm not going to get the laundry done. Well,
and a really good friend of mine, before everything kind of kicked off, we were out together for dinner last week, and she has works in data. Yeah. And it's really challenging for her to focus when she is not behind her desk and like her norm, because she's not doing what you and I have done for years, right? Where you're held responsible by your end client. She's really like project oriented data. And so for her, it's really difficult to like get the motivation to sit behind the desk and do the work that she would normally do from a 9 to 5 in the office. And I think that's what I'm seeing a lot of people struggling with are people who aren't client facing, they are project oriented, they're internal facing. That shift of not being with people in the office to do those kind of project driven positions is really challenging for folks from working from home.
It's the self-accountability piece. I've noticed two things. It's like, can you hold yourself accountable? But the only way you can do that is if you focus on outputs rather than how you're getting the job done. And that's one of the biggest things you say to managers of like managing people who are remotely is you've got to focus on the output. Not did you see, you tried to call, and this came up in the Wall Street Journal. If we call you and you don't pick up within the first minute, we have a problem. And you're like, you kidding me? so they can't take bathroom breaks, because that's what happens when you work from home. You take a bathroom break, or you'd go and walk out, you go and walk the dog, or you go and get your lunch. And in an office, you wouldn't say, "Hey, everyone, I'm about to go and take a bathroom break." So,
No.
it's something. So for me, it's like the self accountability piece is just fascinating. To your point, if you're not used to it.
And I know there's 1,000 tips and tricks on it, and you wrote a great piece, Tony, on how to work from home. But people really are yearning for how do I do this? Because if this is going to be my norm for 3 months, which that's what we're hearing now in the news, then how? How do you function and get out of this? Oh, I'll put the laundry in, I'll clean out the fridge, and then I'll get back to my emails. The productivity level of folks who aren't used to working from home, it's coming down. And I know that there are a lot of people yearning to figure out how do I increase that and get that back up.
And it's interesting you say that, because that was one of the hardest things for me at the beginning. Was this doesn't mean that you're allowed to lie in. Yes, there's time that you don't have to wake up as early as you might have, because you're not actually, driving to an office, or you're walking somewhere. But if you don't get into that habit of wake up at 7 a.m. or whatever time you need to wake up, first thing you do is, as if you had to leave the house, get in the shower, do all of that. I've had days where I'm like, oh, it's 2 p.m. and I haven't showered or brushed my teeth yet. Great, just got sucked into that whirlwind of work, reading the news, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And when I first started working from home, I remember finding the tips and tricks, and the one that has stuck for me is this candle concept. And so I have a scent for me of when the candle is on, and because my problem is I can't turn off. And you know this
Same.
about me, right? I could get up at 5 a.m. and start working and not finish until midnight, right? It's just this constant stream. And so for me, I found myself really having a hard time closing the laptop and actually going downstairs and cooking dinner versus not being able to get into work. And they're both bad, right? There's pros and cons to both, but I really found it helpful of lighting a candle, having that be your scent, right? And it builds habit. Yeah. And it builds habit, right? Okay, when I'm ready, I'll go downstairs, I'll shower, I'll make my morning coffee, do my normal stuff, read the news, great. And then when I come back upstairs to my office, or if I stay downstairs in the dining room, I light that candle, and we're right, away we go. Yeah, we're in the zone.
I saw someone who shared on Twitter the most amazing advice I've ever heard, which was especially for couples, it was a pro tip for couples who find themselves having to both work from home: get yourself an imaginary co-worker to blame all the things on. So Shell keeps leaving the dishwasher open, or Shell keeps eating all the biscuits. Shell will have to have a sit down. And I was like, honestly, it's stupid, but this is the most brilliant tip ever.
It's so fun. So one of my co-workers, actually, him and his partner are working from home right now, and they've implemented a system of a sign that they put on the door of do not disturb when they are deep work or on calls, and then you flip it to open working hours so that they can go in and interact with each other without starting a massive row of you just walked in while I'm in the middle of an important call. But you have to, Tony, you've told me how many times about the divorce rates? We have to figure out how to coexist in this new world.
God. Yeah, and that's I think that's it's funny you bring up the divorce rates. God, it's one of those of the unattended, the unexpected sort of side effects of this global pandemic. And for those of you who are wondering what it is that Saoirse just brought up there, but China was a little ahead of us in, having to deal with the COVID-19 or coronavirus. And the world, I think, for them is slowly getting back to normal. Quarantine has somewhat been lifted. And some of the smaller cities are seeing record high numbers of divorce requests in the weeks, following this, which is just wild. And I guess, think about also China is some of those cities, the spaces in which you can live are much smaller. So that's also something that I've realized of how lucky we are for those of us who have a house, have a garden. Speaking with my dad, I was like, you could all live on separate floors and enjoy life, which is been a challenge for my husband and I right now, who are kind of stuck in Canada. We can come back to that, but where it's been tricky doing this in a tiniest of apartments. But the China piece with the divorce rates cracked me up in one way of just we're all finding ways to have to live with each other. And apparently they've actually run out of appointments to get divorced.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
And the flip side of that, Tony, is that, and I've had some of my friends at home back in London text me about this, like co-workers that were in the process of getting divorced and were still living with partners. And I also saw, and can't remember who it was now, but a fantastic woman shared on Instagram about women in domestic violence situations having to now be in confinement with these situations. And there's a number of charities out there that are raising money for women who are in domestic violence situations and are now actually restricted to the home, and figuring out ways and shelters that can be safe and also follow the CDC's guidelines. But there's so many, like it's a trickle effect, right? Like there's so many things that are impacted by these restrictions that have been put into place that are outside of the general CNN news, breaking news, press release, blah, 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 that we see every day.
You and I talked about this because I think we both are subscribed to some of the same newsletters, but how this was going to hit the women. This pandemic was absolutely going to hit the women, hardest, even though bizarrely the actual side effects of COVID-19 isn't hitting women as hard as it is hitting men for a variety of reasons, which I am not qualified to talk about. But on the sort of, having to work from home, single mothers having to juggle, I mean, that's a whole thing of parents, like, no matter where you are at, having to that realization of, wait, I need to homeschool my kid now on top of doing my job. If you're a single parent and if you're a mother and you're a natural caretaker, like those are hard things. I mean, having to do the dishes and the cleaning and all of that's expected. I had a moment of, why do I feel like I'm constantly cooking? Oh, because I'm cooking for two and I enjoy it. Like my husband does all the washing and I'm happy to do it. But I'm actually cooking 3 times a day now for 2 people, which hadn't, I was like, why do I feel like all of a sudden I've never felt like I've had to be cooking nonstop?
There was one day earlier this week, and I kid you not, we had used every piece of cutlery and every plate and every glass in our house by the end of the 3rd meal, inclusive of snacks. And it was just this like mountain of, it was like, oh my, but yeah.
So no, that, Saoirse, is a perfect reminder, I think, for people who've never done working from home and who are in this moment and I've heard this and I've gotten quite annoyed about it. Oh, work from home isn't just for me. I'm just not productive. I think it's a good reminder that I think no one is productive right now. I am glued to the TV. I am glued to Twitter. I am normally a very productive person working from home, and my production levels are way, way down. So I don't know. I just feel like it's a moment of being nice and kind to yourself if you feel like you're not being productive, because I don't think anyone is right now.
Yeah, I've got to say, for me, this, like, obviously everything kicked in on so I've had 1 week of like full confinement to my home, and it for me was one of the like most productive and busiest weeks I've had in a while, and that mainly because of a lot of the things that my company is doing and the intense development of community that we want to try and build and foster for folks who are doing emergency response provisioning. And so it's funny that you say that, because for me this week has been like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, like cranking out whatever needs to be done. And that's a testament to who I am when it comes to like, when I have a project that is extremely important, like not being able to take myself away from it.
Yeah. Which is one of the dangers of working from home. It's just you never stop, and potential of burning out or potential of never switching off. Talk to me. You mentioned a word there that triggered something for me, which is this whole idea of community building right now. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and what you're working on specifically, because I've read quite a few pieces in the last couple of days that kind of made me smile in a good way, because there's this sentiment that's happening right now of kind of redefining social media. We seem to be re-educating ourselves around what it means to actually be social beings at a distance, what it actually means when we can't post pictures of us out and about on nice boats or on beaches or out with friends. And there's an aspect there of I'm personally getting a sense, and it sounds like on the articles I'm reading that people are getting a sense of what the web was built for in the first place, what social media was built for in the first place, of actually being social beings and actually communicating with each other and connecting and building that sense of community. So I'm curious what you're doing in that field there, how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so Sunday was kind of the day that everything kicked off. I'll say it for me anyway, in the US, with restrictions coming into place in the state of Massachusetts and the state of New York, the completely inside and less emergency provisioning in California trickled in this week. So from that, there was, a company-wide effort to provide the software that we use for free for emergency service provisioning. So that then trickled into what else can we do for the community? And that's manifested in a number of different ways. So one is specifically, how do you use software for emergency provisioning, right? So like that was a big task. We did that live on Friday of this week just gone. And then next week kicks into specifically, how do you take your events from on the ground to digital? Because people who do fundraising, large galas, people who do micro donations, but are going door to door and canvassing, people like the essence of organizing tends to live in person engagement, right? Like that's a whole component of what we do. And so thinking about how to translate that to digital specifically for events, that's been a huge focus of mine this past week. So we're kicking that off on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, specifically speaking to how do you organize your community digitally in this moment that may not actually be COVID-19? Because at the end of the day, you actually might be doing something else in the world. For example, domestic violence abusers, right? Like that, there are so many other really key and important things that are still happening in the world that need to keep moving, right? Like, and when you talk about women being impacted more so than men outside of the medical component of COVID-19, it's because women are being impacted socioeconomically, right? Like we are the social brunt and bearers of what's going to happen when we unfortunately will navigate into a recession post this, right? Like the women will be the bearer of that. And so thinking about how do you continue organizing and continue engaging with your community is Thursday. And then finally, story. And so storytelling and understanding who you are and taking a minute to like actually listen, to actively listen, reflectively listen has been a practice that I've really, really enjoyed over the past like 4.5 years. And so we decided to kind of take that internal practice at Nation Builder out and externally in the world. And so I'm going to be running weekly story groups with anyone who wants to join, whether you're in the Nation Builder ecosystem or not. Come and have kind of a 2-hour dedicated place where you get to actively listen to 8 other people's stories. It's a really, really powerful thing. The concept is called story circles. It's a mechanism or a building block in building what the FCE calls true community. And so, that's kind of what's happening for me, both in a professional and a personal space for over the next couple of weeks.
Amazing. It's interesting you were talking about them. How do you actually use the tools and the software? And I don't know, there's been I'm loath to use that term, but a level of arrogance that I've seen of, easy, I can, it's just getting a few people on a Zoom, how hard can it be? And I'm just like, first of all, being a facilitator of like, what does it mean to actually invite strangers or 20 people or 5 people or 10 people into a group so that everyone feels safe, everyone feels heard and seen. It's like, it's an art. So don't,
art. And Tony, you have first-hand experience with what you kicked off. Like, I'd love to hear a bit more about what happened. Like, why did you decide to kick off a happy hour? And for those of you listening, like Tony hosted a happy hour with women earlier this week to just be in community. So would love to hear about that, Tony, and what went into that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Like I saw a couple of happy hours being kicked off and I was like, this is fun. And I joined one that was fascinating and they decided to, these 2 guys, mostly in the like VC tech world, decided to run a couple and then now they're running them, I think maybe every evening. And I had this moment of this is nice, but this is not actually community. So their model is very different, is whomever wants to join, joins. They send out the Zoom link and then everyone joins in. And basically, because they're very well connected, they'll bring 1 or 2 guests and it's kind of like a very informal fireside chat. They'll ask the guests a couple of questions. they got Zoom bombed, which is a new word that's being coined, when, quite frankly, humans don't know how to set up the technology. So because it was accessible to all and available to all, and the settings were done horrendously, anyone could start sharing their screen, and that's what people took advantage of. They came in and started sharing their screen of pornographic content, so that had to be shut down. What pisses me off, Sorsha, is that they started to blame the tech. And so there's a New York Times piece now out of, well, Zoom's going to have to figure this out. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. This is not tech's fault. First of all, Zoom was never built to be an externally facing social media thing where we can join. So that's the first thing that needs to be put out there. But you and I have been on, I was thinking about this the other day, easily, I think 500 to this day of Zoom meetings, whether it's with one person or
easily
100 people. I've never had pornographic content shared
ever
in my face. This has happened twice now. The last one was with The Information, which is a pretty big media company. And again, I was like, this is not the tech's fault. So it's just fascinating how the stories are coming out of big tech companies are going to have to figure this new world out. I was like, well, that's why I was talking about the arrogance. So are the people who are setting this up. Long story short, is like I was seeing all of this, and the piece that was missing for me was, what does it actually mean to be in community rather than being, which I also think is fine, but being a passenger and watching something play out, which all of the ones I've been to, apart from the Zoom bombing experiences, were very good and full of great content. And I'm part of a couple of women's groups, and I threw it out there to a couple of people of how would you feel about hosting a happy hour and just, coming together and being, let's have this be an experiment and let's just see what happens. And I kind of prepped for the absolute worst of no one showing up, which wouldn't be the worst thing, just being two people and me having to facilitate a conversation, which is why I was like, please join, Sorsha, because just in case we need two people in conversation for others to join in. But I was floored, Sorsha. I was absolutely floored because I got about 100 people saying they were interested. I got 80 people, more or less, rough numbers, say, please send me the invite, set up a quick website, sent people the invite. Got about 45 RSVPs and had about, 36, 40 women show up.
Yeah.
And it's the least amount of facilitation I've ever had to do. And I don't know if it's just because it was all women, but they just jumped in there of, hey, I've got a question. I need to ask something of this community. Oh my God, I can help with that. Tell me more. And I physically felt myself being able to lean back in my chair and just let the community happen. It's just a fascinating experience. I'm also very grateful that it happened that way because I am still pretty much an introvert. And I was saying to my husband the day before, why am I doing this? This is horrible. This is my worst fucking nightmare. And he's like, I don't know. It sounds like you enjoy it. It's like, I hate this. This is so bad. But I don't know. You were there.
Yeah.
Kind of worked, I think.
No, I think it was beautiful. And to your point of women jumping in, it was natural, I think is the best way to describe it. People just naturally were able to share extremely vulnerably, be empathetic towards each other, offer assistance I remember someone talking about their specific job and being in sales and not knowing how right now to do cold outreach and feeling, disgusted with yourself when you do, but know that you have to pay the bills at the end of the month. And that's right. And I think that's the thing for me when you have an entire female gathering, there is a level of comfortable that people have in that moment.
Oof. It's so interesting you said that because it just hit me now that I think I've taken it for granted. I've been in all women's spaces, worked at a company where it was, led by women. We had women gatherings. So I can imagine how for some people it's like a breath of fresh air. Oh, great. Somewhere where I can just relax, be myself.
But that's so rare, Tony.
You're right.
It's so rare. And I think that's, that just feeling of oh.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing I felt from that particular happy hour of just being in a group of women who no one, I think I was walking my dog at one point, but there was no one judging the fact that, you didn't have makeup on or you didn't have your hair done or whatever it was. You just were showing up to say hey, this is crazy.
and showing up for different people means different things. I mean, I got a text from one woman who was like, I put on a bra for this, so I'm pumped. I'm ready. I slapped on some makeup and I put on a bra, which I haven't in the last week. And for me, I had this moment of, well, I'm supposed to just be in Canada for a month. We're stuck here for forever. And I had some fun outfits. And I was like, well, half of these outfits are never going to get worn because I'm in my head. So I was like, I'm putting on the sparkliest, glitteriest thing I can wear. So I was like, and for others, it's just like, I'm in bed, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, but I'm still like that feeling of being able to show up, which we take for granted sometimes.
Mm.
So you're right, like that's safe space.
It is. It's a safe space, and it's being created intentionally to just have an open dialogue versus like, we're coming here to talk about these 15 things or these 5 things, right? Like, it's intentionally an open conversation so that people can feel like they can interject, even if they don't have the most relevant thing to say in that moment.
It's interesting because it's what I learned from that exercise of doing the happy hour, realizing this was an experiment. So I was like, I don't know where this is going to go and I don't actually know what people need. And I got 3 takeaways from that, which was, I'll talk about women in particular, but I think it was true for everyone of, I just need to hear voices and see faces because I'm a social being, and work from home for me could mean that all my friends and friendships that I have are coworkers that I just don't interact with right now, or they're friends that I just can't physically see, but I'm used to seeing many people. And all of a sudden, and I think it took a couple of weeks for people to go from quarantine doesn't mean isolation. It's just a different way of interacting. And you and I spoke about this, that doing this remotely felt very natural for both of us because our friendship grew online. Basically, I feel like we've been in the same physical space maybe a dozen times.
Yeah.
Not that much more.
Not that much more, Tony. Definitely not.
It's just yeah.
But like for me as well, my whole, like the last 8 years of my life have been virtual with my family and friends in the UK.
That's it.
And I am very fortunate in that, like when we come into this moment now where everything is forced to be virtual, that there's no weird, like I call people on FaceTime. I can't remember the last time I actually rang someone, right? Like, that's just how I operate. I need to see someone visually. Like that's what I want to, or how I want to interact with folks. And it's so wild to me now that people having this moment of, oh, we can do this virtually. It's like the software's existed for many, many years.
For many years. I mean, someone on our group on the happy hour mentioned, can I go and walk outside? And we had the amazing Jessica Yelling who came on to just share us what she's been hearing. And she was just like, yeah, absolutely, go and walk. And she's like, well, can I go and walk outside with a friend? She's like, well, the social distancing, so you need to be 6 feet. And you and I were both like, we do this every day. We walk outside together, but we're just holding a phone. And we might fall in a pothole or, trip or, walk on our dogs once in a while. But it doesn't, poor animals, but it doesn't feel awkward. So it's going to be, I'm curious if you've got any thoughts of what the long-lasting impacts of this is going to be like. Do you have a feeling, and I mean, no one knows, but I'm just curious of your gut check, do you have a feeling that when the quarantine is lifted, everyone's going to be like, oh my God, thank God I can go back to the office? Or do you think people are going to be like, oh, that was interesting, work from home, a new way of living, or friendships? Or
I think for me, I have to bucket it, right? So there's going to be like the economic impact. And I think that might mean that offices turn around and say, we're saving money in rent. We know we can work from home.
Yeah.
And like, that's what that looks like moving forward. Then there's going to be the social butterfly-esque people that are like, finally, like, let's go and do this and this happy hour or whatever it is. And then I think in like a local community land, there's been such an emphasis on small businesses.
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be, or I hope at least, that there's going to be a big shift in how people interact with their local communities' businesses. And instead of obviously, buying a gift card right now or doing the curbside pickup, actually going and being in those local restaurants and bars and shops, whatever it is. So I hope that that's a positive impact that comes out of this. But yeah, no one knows right now. Like no one knows.
So interesting. I keep flipping back and forth of people I have this vision that people are gonna love the nice internet that I feel we're living in right now, where people are actually checking in and we're sharing human beings in community and we're doing all of these great happy hours and fun events that's not geared towards what social media has become of look at me, look at how great my life is, but actually the realness. I know that's a little bit utopian, but I have a feeling of that. I do want to, like, the piece that you shared there, which I think is so important around the gift cards. For any of you who are, I shared this with you the other day, Saoirse, but go to givelocal.co. And this was a really, really cool project set up by, I believe, two people in tech, of how to help their local communities and how to help, to your point, the small bars, the small restaurants. And it's just to buy gift cards. So you can actually share restaurants that you know of who have got gift cards URL already, or put their phone number, and just you can actually input onto the website, which I find is really cool. I think it's only US at the moment. I've been in conversation to see if they can open it up to the rest of Europe. But we forget that gift cards are such a nice thing. You can buy it now, you're helping the business, and you can redeem it whenever in 2020, you know?
Yeah. And you've seen, like, there's, I think, always with, you know, times of war, epidemics, you know, natural disasters, you do get some really nice stories about, like, humanity. And I've seen a couple, there was a couple in Texas that left a $9,500 tip on, like, a $40 tab so that they could pay their staff, right? Like, there's another one that left a $1,500 tip in New Mexico. And those are the things for me of, like, if you can, then share, right? Like, then share the wealth so that the recession doesn't hit as bad as 2008.
And if you can afford, if you could afford a nanny, or you could afford to pay your cleaning lady, or if you could, all of these services, keep paying them. Like, I actually, someone said it and it sounds so basic. If you still got your job and your income hasn't changed, I actually think if you could afford them last week, 2 weeks ago, continue to pay them, whether they've got, because these are people who don't have job security, who don't have healthcare, who are not tied to unions. So there's something there as well.
And I don't have the percentage, but I know it is very high, the percentage of domestic workers in this country that are women. Like, back to that, and women of ethnic backgrounds. Like, that's the makeup of the domestic workers, especially in the US. I won't speak for other countries.
Yeah.
And thinking about how, you know, the trickle-on effects of this post, you know, hopefully soon there is a medicine in place, a vaccine in place, but it's the after effect and how that's going to impact women in particular. And we should stay close to it and try and update and put it into our podcast as we continue to kind of go back to regular scheduled content.
It felt important to, I actually enjoyed talking about this. It feels important to name what's happening around us, but also just to share all of the stories that are coming out of this, the good, the bad, the problematic, the things that we should worry about. But remind me, Saoirse, you're in Boston. Has it just before we leave, what's it like in Boston right now? Are you in a lockdown, or is it? No. Okay.
So last Sunday, it went into mandatory closure for restaurants and bars. And then the 10-person gathering limit came in on Tuesday. And then what was the other one? And that's been hearsay, right? It's like, apparently today we'll get an announcement from Governor Baker of official lockdown with support from National Guard. But, you know, it's 4:00 here and nothing's come out yet. So they might do a 6:00 press release like they did last weekend.
Yeah. And I'm in Vancouver right now, and it's been weird here. It doesn't seem like, I know there's far fewer people than in America per square meter, but it doesn't feel as severe, although I, went to Whole Foods and it was 1-per-1 being granted entry. I saw really cool news this morning about San Francisco, that we're managing to flatten the curve in San Francisco, because apparently everyone is obeying by the rules of everyone's inside, no one goes out. And so even within just 48 hours, they've already seen how it's just interesting of how every city and country seems to be going about it differently.
Well, and on CNN last night, they had the town hall, which, by the way, if folks are interested, they're doing kind of every other day a town hall with different experts. So it's actually really great. It's like a 2-hour town hall.
Wait, who's they in the day?
CNN.
Okay.
Yeah, CNN hosts it, and they bring in expertise from different areas, talking about economics, talking about medically, talking about thing here. They had Mark Cuban on, actually, with Anderson Cooper, which was really good a couple of nights ago, maybe Monday or Tuesday night. But no, so last night they had a reporter who was on one of the islands in Georgia, which is a very popular destination for spring break. And he was literally, and like haven't seen that visual in like a week, but he was standing on the corner of like a broad walk, like a main street, and it was bumping. I mean, like restaurants packed, patios full, beaches full, kids like whooping and like having like what are those like flower necklaces, and it was crazy because he was literally just like, obviously the governor of Georgia has not, mandated anything yet. Like, the question was basically, should there be a federal response to this?
Yeah.
And we've seen kind of what Trump's presentation of that is that it's up to each individual state. And to your point about San Francisco, right? If we're seeing this work, why can't we have a federal mandate? And I know obviously there's a, separation of power, there's, federal versus state. People in rural, Idaho may not be impacted by this, right? Same in Nebraska and whatever it is, but and there probably isn't a one size fits all solution, but there has to be something done about these kids, right? Like, and it's not just kids. The guy on CNN was saying like, there's families out here. There's 7-year-olds out here just like hanging out. It's not just the millennial and Gen Z population, which have been absolutely battered in the news this week for going out to bars and whatever.
That feeling of them the feeling that I remember having of being invincible when you're 20. This doesn't affect me. This has got nothing to do with me.
And the media has a role to play in that. The media has a role to play in the invincible component, where it was like, if you're 20, you don't have anything to worry about, was like a headline for like a week prior to us going into shutdowns across the US. So that just really fascinated me in Georgia of like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the borders piece is fascinating to me, and just I can't help put it in, obviously, in a European lens, where there's a couple of stories that have been coming out how the free movement of goods and people right now in Europe is actually not helping this, because obviously people can easily go from one country to another without being questioned, without having to show your passport. But also the reason why the European Union was created and has rules and regulations in place is because there's a very well-known sentence that pandemics don't know borders. So it's no use trying to solve this at a border type level. So per state, per country, it's not going to work, because pandemics don't know borders. They are going to, go beyond the borders. So it's going to be interesting to see how this is solved from one. Yeah.
And that
just needs a global solution
triggered for me, Tony. They're like the 22, 24-year-olds that are in Georgia on an island. When they come back to Illinois or to Massachusetts or to California, that's where the spread will happen, right? Like, that's the impact that I think we just need to figure out. So, with that, stay at home, everyone.
Stay at home and listen to this podcast. Or any other podcast, but start with this one.
But ours.
But ours. Stay safe, everyone.
Well, seriously, you too, Tony.
Right back at you, Saoirse. Hi, everyone. And this week it's my turn to close out this fun episode. Thank you ever so much for everyone who's listening in, who's been continuing to listen in, who's just joined us on this wackadoo journey. You can always follow our adventures at www.unapologeticwomen.co. And you can also find us on Instagram as well, which is Unapologetic Women Podcast. Is that the only places we are, Saoirse?
Yes.
Are we anywhere else?
No.
I should
just
know
in
this,
the places that matter.
Oh, look at
the
that.
World Wide Web.
The World
Instagram.
Wide Web. Soon maybe TikTok one day if we don't get any older. All that to say, thank you ever so much and see you next week.